since I broke into comic books, I've been living in small towns. My attitude is, I know a lot of guys that live in New York, and with Federal Express and those kind of courier services now, you can live literally any place on the planet, not just in North America. I feel that if you don't live near the hub, and they know you're going to come in every Tuesday at 12 o'clock, that if they go out of their way to FedEx you something or get on the phone call and make a long-distance phone call, they probably want you a little bit more. Because a guy who's coming in every day at noon, then they go, well, let's phone Todd or Bill or George or Fred to do this job. And if they all say no, then the guy who walks in at noon, we know he's coming in at noon. So he's our fifth choice. So I always figured that if you move away and they still kind of hunt you down, then that tells you something about, like, where you're standing and how much in demand you are amongst some of the other things.
And you can keep testing it. You can keep moving further and further to make sure. If ever you have any feeling of insecurity. That
was it. People go, why do you live on Vancouver Island? And because I live up in Canada off the West Coast, which is about as far away from New York as I can get. And to go any further, I'd have to go to Japan because that's the next piece of land. But
I thought you were going to say that's the next plan I have.
Yeah, well, maybe. But I don't know. Like I said, for me, I've always worked in isolation, so I always figured that by working in isolation, I kind of sink and swim on my own. I'm not influenced by a lot of things that are in LA or New York, and I don't hear a lot of the styles and the gossip and the things that are happening, so I just kind of have to make it up myself. Some of it works, some of it doesn't, but so far it hasn't really come back to haunt me that I'm just going, well, I haven't seen anybody else's stuff because I haven't been up to the office. So, well, this would be cool if I did it this way. So, in some respects, I think it's made me think a lot more than if I had more creative input around me.
Every artist works differently, and every artist has a different opinion and a different philosophy about his work. Some of them like to be right in the hub. You're better off, you feel, further away. But what it really comes down to is the basic talent itself. And it's almost like when you build a better mousetrap, they say the world will beat a path to your door. I think if you've got the stuff, whether you're in Vancouver or Mars or right in the heart of New York, somehow you'll be discovered, it'll come out, and then you just work the way you're the happiest. But everybody is going to want you when you're really good. I mean, look at me. I could have had my choice of anybody up here. And I got to tell you one thing. It is so great working in the comic book business because so many of the guys are like a Todd McFarlane, where you don't feel you're working. I mean, it's fun. You're just with friends and people you admire and respect. And speaking of that, you had mentioned to me earlier before we started that John Romita had visited you in Vancouver. And Romita John is one of my absolute all-time favorite people. Tell us a little about it.
John Romita's, maybe some of the people don't know, did a long body of work on Spider-Man with yourself. When I came into the office to pick up a new book and ended up getting offered a Spider-Man book.
He's the art director at Marvel
now. Right, he's now
yeah.
the art director, right? And he had laid down what I consider the definitive Spider-Man. I mean, Ditko had started it and did it the
Steve Ditko, the guy who started it.
Steve Ditko had done the artwork on the first 40 issues with you, and kind of laid down kind of a quirky style, but it was actually John Romita who does the Spider-Man that I tell people is on pajamas and is on the towels and is on the bubblegum wrappers, that definitive look. Well, my attitude has always been, well, if you're going to do something, you got to get notice. I don't care what it is, even if it's bad notice. That's better than no notice at all. So they kind of wanted me to draw like John Romita, and I didn't want to do it because it's like becoming a painter and saying, well, I'm going to do like Michelangelo or Norman Rockwell. The best you can hope for is to be almost as good as Norman Rockwell. That's the best you can hope for. So I go, the only thing I can be is either almost as good as John Romita, or I can go out there and make a career for myself. Now, when you do those kind of things, you don't state those facts. It ends up looking like you're bucking the system somewhat, because it's like, oh my gosh, well, why is he changing this and this and this and this when we've done it a certain way? But it was more out of a respect to John, because I just go, I can't add nothing to his stuff. I couldn't add. So what I did is I try to pick the best of what Steve Ditko did, which was that quirky, kind of funky style. And then I took what I thought John Romita brought to it, which was the pretty people, the great storytelling. I mean, everything was perfect on John's stuff. kind of meld the two of them together and mix in like a 90s flair with it and kind of spit it back out on the page, and it seemed to work. I mean, I made a couple of cosmetic changes with the eyes and with hairdos. And
You made the eye spaces about 10 times bigger, the whites of the eyes.
Yeah, but again, I mean, those are kind of things that when you get on a book, you have to kind of get into it and go, well, Spider-Man. I always felt that some of the guys at a certain point always made it Spider-Man, emphasis on man. And I know he's actually a man and stuff, but my attitude is quite the opposite. Once he throws on the costume, he doesn't have to be able to, his joints can bend, and you know what I mean? He didn't I put him in impossible
played up
positions.
the spider part.
Right, so I do Spider-Man, and I put him in the positions that people go, a human being can't get into it. And I go, you're right, a human being can't, but it looks cool, you know? I mean, you turn the page and it's like, wow, look at him hyper-extended here and triple jointed there, and they got webbing all over the place. And it's not realistic, but it's a heck of a comic book shot.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. Let me tell you, you said something that I think borders on being profound when you were mentioning that if you copy somebody else or try to work in someone else's style, the most you'll ever be is a good imitation or a good copy. And especially if a guy has his own style down so perfectly that you can't improve on it, all you can do is be similar or change it. But if you change it, if you do something that's your own individualistic style, that's really the way to succeed or to reach the top. And I really think that goes in every field. If you're an actor, you won't get anywhere by imitating a Robert De Niro or a Marlon Brando. You've got to get your own style and your own thing.
Right, well, I mean, something like okay, on John Romita, I went up there, and a couple of times he sat me down, and I always tell people, if you go up to Marvel, you go up to DC comic books, to talk to people like Dick Giordano and to John Romita, who've been around for years, and they don't tell you to draw. I rarely tell a kid to draw better, because if it was that simple, I'd walk into the office and they go, draw like Michelangelo, Todd. And so I can't draw like Michelangelo, so I'm not going to tell a kid to go out there and draw better. What I can give them is the same advice that Dick Giordano and John Romita gave me, which is the technical side of it. This is how you do establishing shots. This is how you move characters in and out. This is how you do this. Maybe be on the lookout for these 5 points, and all of a sudden, when I walk out of there, I'm now aware, the next time I do that page, I'm now aware of 5 new things. If nobody ever tells you about it, you're not aware of it. So the more things that you can make people aware of, the better. Now, if they say the introduction is show the establishing shot of the outside of a house, that can be done 1,000 ways. A guy maybe who doesn't have quite that much talent or is young and whatever, he might just do a nice standard bland shot, but somebody else might shoot it through, let's say, a bunch of trees. There might even be a spider web in the trees, and then you can see the silhouette of the shack through. I mean, and I'm just going from, or, you know, a down shot in between, like birds fluttering around or whatever it is.
Well, as you were mentioning before, it's a case of taking something and being able to make it interesting.
Right.
And it depends on how you present it. And I think, again, that's one of the differences between a really top comic book artist and just a good artist. You know, there's an artist named Alex Raymond. You probably know his work. He used to do Flash Gordon, and he was wonderful. But then he did Secret Agent X9, I think, and he did Rip Kirby newspaper strips. They were the most beautifully drawn strips you could ever find anywhere. And he was an artist. All the artists used to use him for reference if they wanted to know the correct way to draw a hand or a figure or a smile or anything. But his work never, when he did Rip Kirby and Secret Agent X9, I think he did another, I've forgotten, it didn't really catch the fans. It didn't meet with their approval. Nobody got excited about it. It was so perfect and photographic and well drawn, but it had no excitement and no quality, which he did have when he did Flash Gordon.
Right. Well, even like Bern Hogarth, who did Tarzan, did the perfect Tarzan, and Tarzan was a beautiful. There's a lot of guys out there that you got to find your niche.
Perfect anatomy, and they do everything perfectly, but there's no excitement.
Yeah, and superhero comic books, like I said before, I think superhero comic books are over-exaggeration, melodramatic. Everything has got to be, the perfect stuff only works on the odd occasion, and otherwise everything else has got to be pompous and a lot of glitz and whatever. Now, it's up to the writer to throw interesting stories in there, make the characters interesting, but while you're making Aunt May or whoever interesting while she's pouring coffee, I don't care really what you're putting in verbally. All I know is that you got to bring across these 4 points of information so that the comic book will move. But I'm just not going to show you a headshot of her talking while you're making that information. I've got to make it visually interesting, like you're saying, whether it's a close-up of her pouring the coffee and her reflections in there. You can give me the information, but I still have to make it look visually. As a matter of fact, we could be doing a voiceover on it. Somebody might be talking about their past life, and I could be doing something completely different.
But you know, it's all part of your personality. Now, take you right now. You're sitting here and you're talking about whatever you're talking about. I've been paying no attention, so I don't know what it is. But you're doing it with expression, you're doing it with emotion, and you're actually doing it with a little bit of excitement. Now, I could be sitting here with some other guy who'd be saying, yes, well, I wake up early in the morning and I go to my board and I draw. And after 2 minutes, the audience would be asleep or they'd get their money back from the tape. Now, this tape, I guarantee, people are going to save it and it'll increase in value and it'll end up in the Smithsonian. But what I mean is, it depends really on something inside of somebody, how much personality they have. And to me, it's all show business. Everything is entertainment, whether it's comic books or writing novels or being an actor or being a screenwriter or whatever it is. You've got to find a way to make it exciting, and I think you are one of the top people who have that ability to do it. And I was just wondering, how would you, well, I think you have explained it in a sense. Even if you take somebody pouring a cup of coffee, you'll find a way to make it exciting by the reflection of the cup or by the angle or the perspective, because you can't see it in a dull way. You know, it's got to be exciting.
Right. Well, the one little story that I tell the kids that they seem to like is, and I usually do this when I'm at a convention or something, I got the whole crowd there, is my whole essence of what comic books is I could take a character like Thor, and I could make a poster of him picking his nose, and the kids would buy it. Now, I usually get like a little bit
I'd
of
say it would be a collector's item.
Yeah, well, and they laugh, and they go, there's no way. I mean, he's picking his nose, there's no way you can do it. And the way you can do it is by doing all the things that make comic book interesting. Now, when I draw Thor, Thor does not stand there like you and I. Thor stands there, his legs would be bow-legged, his chest would be barreled out. In the one hand, he's got his hammer. He'd be holding his hammer, again, with a tight, clenched fist, so that his veins were rippling through his arm right here. I'd give him wings on his helmet that were fluttering in the wind, twisting and turning. He's got long hair like a girl. It would be coming over his face, blowing out here.
The wind has to be blowing.
Oh, the wind's got to be blowing.
And that cape has to be blowing.
And the cape would be all over the place. The hair would be all over the place. I'd have dust billowing up at his feet. And hidden in all that, he'd be sitting there with his left hand, getting that little booger there. And you want to know what? You wouldn't even know that he was picking his nose. So the point is, if I can make a guy picking his nose exciting, then I can make him slugging somebody easily exciting. So,
it's a great story.
And those are the things that the kids out there that are trying to aspire into being artists have got to look at. They've got to make everything exciting, 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 and then people go, wow, 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 and hope that you get tagged up with a writer that also is going to make it so that it's a product that's not just glitzy artwork, that's also going to be a good read on top of it.
You know, I want to tell you, it's just my luck. I got a show like this, and I have to get a fella who won't say anything. It's like pulling teeth, dragging the words out of him, and I don't know how we're going to handle it. But look, you were talking about drawing, and we must have a lot of people watching this cassette right now and saying, all this talk, 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 why can't we see Todd draw something? Yeah. How does the guy draw? What does he look like? And I think it would be great. Now, we haven't practiced or rehearsed this. I have no idea how we're going to do it. Okay. But is there any way that we can get the camera on and get a piece of paper and something for you and actually let everybody see you do a drawing? Can we do that? Let's try it, okay? You want to get over to the board?
Yep.
Here we go.
Good.
Okay, Todd, why don't we come over here and let you do your thing?
My thing. Okay, one of the first things that I try to tell kids to do, this would just be the Todd McFarlane, how to do comic books, and then I'll get into some of the technical things. And one of the things is that if they say we got, let's say, Spider-Man swinging over the city, I've seen 100 times, now this isn't going to be that complicated, but I've seen 100 times done before. Here, we'll make Spider-Man here.